Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 19 of the 2024 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft. And yes, the NFL Combine is in full swing. Recording this on Thursday, February 29th. And all I can say is Dallas Turner, Peyton Wilson, probably the top two, along with Braden Fisk. Braden Fisk, the athleticism off the charts. This was a guy we knew the get-off, getting into the backfield, but the way that guy was moving, guaranteed a spot and round number 2, in my opinion. We've got a lot to talk about, obviously. We'll have the recap going over each of the days. Who are the big winners? Who are the disappointments? Who's got a little bit of work to do? And really, who are the guys that are sending the scouts back to watch the film? We'll cover all of that in the coming days and weeks, obviously. March 1st, we've got the defensive backs and tight ends. And then really what this podcast is going to be dedicated towards, because, look, last podcast was all about the defense. This is going to be all about the offense. We're talking about quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, all showcasing their talents on Saturday, March the 2nd. And then March 3rd, we've got the offensive line and the specialists. We'll throw in the tight ends with this discussion as well in between March 2nd and March 3rd, just so that we can go ahead and talk about the tight ends a little bit, who we can expect to show up and show out on March 1st. There's a lot to cover. We got 168 offensive players and 6 specialists. Want to try to be able to discuss as many of these players as possible. So let's jump right into things. And look, I think the quarterbacks at the top made it easy for me, at least in terms of the guys that are actually working out. Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake Maye, consensus top 3 quarterbacks in the draft. And look, they're probably going to go 1, 2, and 3 in the draft. None of them are working out at the Combine. They're all deciding to wait and work out at their pro day. Makes sense when you look at the guys at the top of the draft. Guys like Matthew Stafford, Sam Bradford, and Andrew Luck all decided not to work out at the Combine. Worked out okay for them. They were still the number 1 overall pick. Same goes for Caleb Williams. He's got as many as 8 teams that he's going to be meeting with at the Combine. So he'll still be busy. So in addition to the top 3 teams, Bears, Commanders, and Patriots, you're also looking at the Giants at 6, Atlanta at 8, the Jets at 10, and then Vikings, the Raiders, the Broncos, a lot of different teams that are going to want to at least interview Caleb Williams before things are all said and done. I think the thing with Caleb Williams, obviously he's a special talent in terms of the playmaking ability off script. Can he play within the confines of the offense, especially within the pocket? That's the biggest question mark, right? I think his throws outside the numbers, he still struggles there with accuracy from within the pocket. But he's able to, the accuracy over the middle, much better. You see the touch, you see the arm strength, you see the torque when he's on the move. It's absolutely ridiculous. 16 fumbles. There has to be a discussion there. When you think about USC quarterbacks and fumbles, you think of Sam Darnold. When he was coming out of SC, he couldn't hold on to the football. That really plagued him even when he got to the NFL. So that's going to be something that Caleb Williams, I'm sure that question will come up during those interviews. Jayden Daniels, we know what he is, that vertical threat, and then the ability to run as well. Most of his plays were made within the pocket. What happens when the play breaks down? You see the poise within the pocket, but you wonder, can he make plays outside the pocket? Doesn't really have to do that. A lot of the quarterbacks aren't doing that on the move, on the run all the time. So Jayden Daniels, we'll see him at LSU's pro day. And then Drake Maye. Drake Maye makes a lot of throws look effortless. Big body, a lot of contested catches by from his players, and just the ability, the accuracy, the willingness to make those throws, trusting that arm, trusting the ball placement, and does a good job throwing his receivers open as well. So that leaves the next tier of quarterbacks, and really these guys are going to get to be on full display as the top quarterbacks actually working out, and that's J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, and Michael Penix Jr. So if you're scoring at home, that's going to be QB5, QB7, and QB8 at the Combine. So they're all going to be working right in that same mix of players. And so you're going to get to really evaluate arm strength. You're going to be able to evaluate accuracy, ball placement, anticipation with those throws, the touch on the short to intermediate throws. You want to see where Michael Penix Jr. is with that. I think he really struggles. That's where he struggles the most. The deep ball, we know, hey, he can hit these guys in stride. It's unreal. You think about a guy like Carson Palmer and his ability with those deep balls and the precision passing. You'd see him just drop the ball in a bucket, literally 50-plus yards. And, so you think about that, but I think for Penix Jr., it's really that touch. That's what he really needs to work on. And so you want to see what that looks like. For Bo Nix, I think it's really proving to everyone that he has the goods. People think about Bo Nix, they talk about, well, does he have the arm strength? Can he throw on the move? 61 starts under his belt. The intangibles are there. The leadership is there. So that's going to be the question mark. And I think the fun part about this is going to be that budding rivalry between Nix and Penix Jr. It started in the Pac-12 championship. And then after that, you get the Senior Bowl and all the workouts there. And now you're going to have them right next to each other at the Combine. And then just imagine if they get drafted by two teams in the same division where they're playing each other twice a year. I think this is really going to be a budding rivalry. We're not going to see the last of it. And then there's J.J. McCarthy, maybe the most polarizing quarterback of the group. All three of these guys, there are some that talk about them. Hey, they're the number 4 quarterback. Others have them at 6. So it's really interesting with all three of these guys. But J.J. McCarthy, I think there's the biggest swing because the positive is, man, this guy, you see the flashes, you see the potential. He's young, he's brash, he's a good leader, and this is a guy that's able to make throws on the move. You watch his ability to throw receivers open, the anticipation, the ball placement, very high-level stuff, but then he disappears at times. All of that stuff disappears. The decision-making at times can get him into trouble. And then, obviously, you look at Michigan. Yes, they were a run-first offense, but at some point you want to see him take over a game, and he was never asked to do that. And so the question mark really is he, is it really just a product of the system and that they were just running the football, or is there something that has to do with J.J. McCarthy himself? So you really want to see his workouts. I think the interviews are going to be key for him as well. Obviously Jim Harbaugh speaks very highly of him, thinks he should be QB1. There's probably a little bit of bias there, but I think that's really where you're going to see a lot of it play out. All three of these guys, I think, will interview very well. It's just going to be a pick your poison in terms of what you're really looking for a franchise. Then it gets into Spencer Rattler, Michael Pratt, Jordan Travis. That's the next group of receivers after this. I think Spencer Rattler, could he go round 2? It's possible, but I have him going round 3. This is the guy that's continued to get better each and every year. Effortless arm strength, better than what you would expect in terms of an athlete. Michael Pratt, I think this is the guy, just consistency is the biggest thing with him. You see the flashes, but you didn't see it all the time. So you want to see him consistently throw in, throw out. Can he make all the throws? And then Jordan Travis. We know that he's had a devastating leg injury. He's told Steelers Depot that he expects to be 100% by May, which is awesome in terms of that time frame. But I think he's going to kill his interviews. I think he's just going to absolutely nail them. Teams are going to fall in love with Jordan Travis, the leadership that he's shown with the leg injury and everything else, and leading them. Obviously, the disappointment not getting into the playoff, but he led that team through all of that. And so this is the guy that I think he can handle adversity. We've seen that, and I think he's the guy that's not getting out of round number 4. So teams desperate for a quarterback or looking for a quarterback possibly for the future, get one in the first 4 rounds, because then after that there's a steep drop-off, because that next group, who's going to lead that group? Is it going to be Devin Leary out of Kentucky? We saw what he did at NC State. Looked like a guy that could be in the first 4 rounds, in that conversation. Really had a weird senior year there at Kentucky with the Wildcats, and you want to see if he can rebound. Can he put the accuracy issues behind him? That's going to be key. Sam Hartman, Notre Dame, obviously the intangibles are going to be there. This guy's a leader, a veteran. He's played a ton of football there at Wake Forest and then at Notre Dame, but he's limited athletically. He's just an okay athlete, okay arm strength, nothing to write home about. Is he this year's Brock Purdy, if you will? And then Austin Reed, I think, is a talented quarterback there at Western Kentucky. He's kind of one of those guys that's flying under the radar. And then Joe Milton out of Tennessee. Joe Milton III, cannon for an arm, struggles with accuracy. He's really only got one speed, and he's one of those guys, he's kind of a fringe draftable quarterback at this point. So obviously the arm strength is going to wow teams. They're going to say, you know what, maybe he should be a developmental prospect. So keep an eye out there for him as well. So 14 total quarterbacks. We can see as many as 13 of them drafted. We've had an average of 11 quarterbacks drafted over the last 3 years. So I think it's right in that range with this group. You think about 14 that were drafted a season ago. Look, Keaton Slovis from BYU, potentially Talia Tagovailoa of Maryland, Tagovailoa, Carter Bradley of South Alabama, the biggest snubs in the group. I think really at the end of the day, the 13 that I mentioned, that's probably the group that you're going to look and see most likely drafted when it's all said and done. We get to the receivers now, and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers, they've decided that they're not going to work out. And in fact, Marvin Harrison Jr. said, I'm not even working out at my pro day. I'm just getting ready for my rookie season. You've already know what this guy can do. Look, Jamar Chase didn't even play his final season there at LSU, and we saw what Jamar Chase has been able to do for Joe Burrow. I think that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a lock to be a go-to wideout for good old Kyler Murray. I think that this guy, Larry Fitzgerald 2.0, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. But then that means Rome Odunze is going to be on display and has a chance to really narrow that gap between him and the other two. With Malik Nabers, look, this guy has a second gear. You watch him get up on those corners so quick, and then he just flies right by him, right? But with Rome Odunze, look, he'll probably measure in right around 6'3" and 215. Could he run a sub 4.40? You're going to see the speed, you're going to see the athleticism, you're going to see the hands, you see the route running as well, the suddenness. This is a big physical receiver, and I think if he shows out really well, he's not getting out of the top 10. There's no way you can deny Rome Odunze as a top 10 pick in this year's draft. And so I think it's a very smart move, especially knowing that those other guys are not working out. Now, Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU, this is a guy, look, he shared the spotlight with Malik Nabers and Jayden Daniels, and I think people initially weren't really talking about him a whole lot, and it was kind of odd that people weren't, because this was a guy that was a bona fide deep threat. He's a taller receiver. He's 6'4", 6'5", right around 200 pounds, 68 catches, over 1,100 yards, 17.3 yards per reception, and 17 touchdowns in 2023. So we're going to see that vertical speed. I want to see what the 10-yard split is going to be with him as well. Because is it long speed with him, or are we going to see that quick acceleration? That's really one of the big things that you're going to be looking at the Combine. It looks like he has some of that quick speed and the ability to make his cuts, but a lot of those routes that he was running was getting vertical because they wanted to get vertical in a hurry because, look, Jayden Daniels is going to be able to throw that ball over the top. You want to see that change of direction. What's that short shuttle going to look like? 3-cone drill. Those are going to be things that you're going to be looking for with Brian Thomas Jr. for sure. After that, then the conversation becomes, who's the next receiver to get drafted? Is it going to be Keon Coleman, the bigger receiver out of Florida State, or is it going to be Xavier Worthy out of Texas? Now, when I look at Keon Coleman out of Florida State, this is a big physical receiver, a guy who wins those 50-50 balls, and look, he'll have guys draped all over him and will still, he looks like a rebounder out there, a la Drake London. And Drake London, look, we know that he came off the board in the top 10 to the Atlanta Falcons. And, the playmaking ability there, he was number 8 overall. But just to give an idea with where Drake London was, he didn't work out at the Combine, was measured in at 6'3" and 7/8", 219 pounds with 33-inch arms. So just in terms of the measurements, that's going to be interesting to see exactly where Keon Coleman lines up. He just reminds me of Drake London. I just don't think he's necessarily the playmaker that London was coming out of SC. But Xavier Worthy is a guy that is going to be a vertical threat at the next level. I'm a big fan of Worthy's. I think this is a guy that, he's 6'1", 160. Can he be rerouted? Sure. But, man, he's so quick in and out of his breaks. He's a guy that's going to get vertical on you. And, he's a guy that I think, I'm looking at the Chiefs sitting there at number 32 overall. They're going to need another vertical threat to run with Rashee Rice. And I think Worthy could absolutely be that guy. Outside of that, then you look at guys like Lad McConkey of Georgia, Ricky Pearsall of Florida. These are two guys that I think were flying under the radar just a little bit, but I think the more everybody watches these two guys, you fall in love with them. I think more so, Lad McConkey was more of a known asset, more so than Ricky Pearsall. I guess that was until he kind of backhanded that throw. I want to say it was against Marshall down the seam. Absolutely ridiculous catch. Showing off those hands. Both of these guys, they don't drop anything, but the suddenness with their route running ability is what really sets them apart, and I think they're going to run a lot faster than people expect. Quicker than fast, maybe, but let's see what those 40 times show up as. I think these are two guys that could end up coming off the board in round number 2. I could actually put them ahead of a lot of these other receivers. Adonai Mitchell out of Texas. I think he's going to test very well. You're going to look at him, and I saw one draftnik online say that he reminded him of CeeDee Lamb. I wouldn't go that far. And the biggest thing is you see flashes from Adonai Mitchell, but you worry, is this a guy that's only going to give you those flashes and that's going to be it? Because he wasn't overly productive in his time at Georgia, and then when he transfers to Texas, there were flashes, but you never saw it play in and play out, game in and game out. Still 845 yards through the air and 11 touchdowns, but he still leaves you wishing that you had more. And so that's one of those things, is he a Terrace Marshall type of a guy? What really are you getting with Adonai Mitchell? I think Xavier Leggett is a guy that's going to be interesting. What is he going to measure in at? How big is he? Is he a DK Metcalf type of a guy? Because look, this is a guy that's going to get vertical on you. More receptions in his first game than I want to say in his previous years with the Gamecocks combined. Just a breakout season. He's a physical dude, 6'1", 217, so he's a couple of inches shorter than DK. But even still, when you're talking about a big physical receiver like that and a vertical threat, you want to make sure that he's also able to get in and out of his breaks quickly. So I think the short shuttle and the 3-cone drill are going to be things that people are going to be watching with Leggett. I think Troy Franklin is going to just blaze down that track. He's going to be so fast. I think there are some issues with concentration at times, being able to track the football. But he's still a guy that I think could end up being a round 2 guy. I think some people have him in round 1. I think that's a little too rich for him. Devontae Walker, I think, is going to test really well. You don't want to watch the hands. There were some concerns at times there at North Carolina, playing through contact and just a couple of drops as well. Brendan Rice out of USC, I think, is a big physical receiver. You want to see what he tests as a route runner as well. But the test with the 40 time, I think he's going to test really well. He's got surprising speed. It's not just the build-up speed. This is the guy that can get there in a hurry, and because of that physicality, his ability to attack the football. If he can play through contact, and he showed that he was able to do that at the Senior Bowl, I think he's the guy whose draft stock is going to continue to rise. Roman Wilson out of Michigan, another guy who's going to be a sudden route runner. Also a guy that knows how to get vertical in a hurry. I think he's a guy that's going to put on a show. How about Malik Washington out of Virginia? This is a guy that's going to be probably a late day 2, early day 3 pick. A guy that started his career at Northwestern, transfers to Virginia, and a guy that's going to be a speed demon in the slot. A guy that I think is going to be so versatile. He's only 5'9", but 192 pounds, over 1,400 yards, and 9 touchdowns for the Cavaliers. Keep an eye out for him. Other guys to make note of, Jamari Thrash of Louisville, the ball control there and the ability to make plays down the field. How about Taj Washington out of USC? This was a guy that, they call him the chef, let him cook, right? Over 1,000 yards this past season. He was the guy that really led that USC wide receiver room. It wasn't Brendan Rice, it was Taj Washington. And this is a guy, look, he played through that entire career, played against Louisville in the bowl game. Brendan Rice sat out. And this is a guy that, look, he looked good in the East-West Shrine game. And this was a guy that I think was really, people were kind of writing off. And now this is a guy that we can see come off the board in the 4th or 5th round. I don't know that he's going to have the best vertical speed, but I think the suddenness and the ability to change directions in a hurry, I think that's going to bode well for Washington. And look, he can get vertical on you. I just don't know that the 40 time. I think it's more with the way that he runs his routes. Johnny Wilson's going to be an interesting guy out of Florida State. He's 6'7", over 230 pounds. Is he a receiver? Is he a tight end? I think the long speed, because he's got those long strides, he's one of those guys that makes plays down the football field. So can he sink those hips? Can he come back to the football? That's going to be a lot to watch out for with Johnny Wilson as well. I think Anais Smith out of Texas A&M, you're going to see some good speed from him, and then the suddenness. Jalen Polk out of Washington is a guy that should be on team's radar right there in that that day 2 range. I think he's another guy that you're going to be watching to test pretty well. Then you get to, how about Javon Baker? We haven't talked about him yet. I want to see what that vertical is going to be with him, because he wins all of those 50-50 balls. He's physical as well, but the vertical, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy has a 40-inch vertical leap. And then I'm curious to see what the speed is. He's a guy that should be a day 2 pick. Jermaine Burton out of Alabama, vertical threat. Watch the speed there. Jacob Cowing, I think, is going to be more sudden and quicker than he is fast. Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky. Is he going to be the next Deebo Samuel? That's going to be a big question mark. So he's right around 5'11", 215 pounds. He's built like a running back, but he's playing receiver, right? And so when you think about Deebo, he was a second-round pick of the 49ers back in 2019, number 36 overall. And when you watched him there at the Combine, ran a 4.48 40 with a 1.48 split at 5'11" and 214 pounds. So when you think about that, 39-inch vertical leap as well. So I think with the comparisons, Malachi Corley has his work cut out for him, because I don't know that he's quite that fast, and I don't know that he's quite as explosive in terms of that lower body explosiveness. But, it's one of those things where I think if he does that, though, he's a guy that is going to solidify his status as a second rounder, because teams are going to be looking for the next Deebo Samuel. This is a copycat league. They're going to be looking for the next everything. Jaquan Jackson out of Tulane, another slot-type receiver. You're going to see some speediness out of him. And then the diminutive Anthony Gould out of Oregon State. He's a guy that has a chance to be one of the faster receivers as well. Very sudden in and out of his breaks. I think not only can he get vertical, he's one of those guys that could be an ankle breaker out on the field. And then, how about Jalen McMillan out of Washington? Battled injuries this year, so he's kind of the forgotten man. Jalen Polk really emerged as a go-to guy, go-to threat as that number 2 for Michael Penix Jr. And look, I saw some film posted on X, and I look, he's snatching balls away from Christian Gonzalez when he was at Oregon. And so when I look at Jalen McMillan, he's a guy that I think would be a perfect slot receiver. Just let him go, let him work up the seam. Day 2, early day 3. And then Luke McCaffrey, I think he's a guy for Rice that I think that he's a perfect fit for San Francisco. Go play with his brother. But you watch the hands, you watch the physicality, you watch his ability to separate late. That's something that's really interesting. You're not going to see a lot of that play out at the Combine, but curious to see what that speed looks like. I think that's going to end up impacting his draft stock overall. I have him as a 4th rounder right now, and I think that'll help him solidify that status, if he runs well there at the Combine. So when you're looking at the receivers, we were just talking about this group, 39 total receivers invited to the Combine. Over the last 3 years, we've averaged 31 receivers taken, with just 32 a season ago. But this is a very deep wide receiver class. I think that we could easily see as many as 34, 35 receivers taken. If there was a snub, you're probably looking at Joshua Cephas out of UTSA. I know that there were some off-field issues with him, and that was really what probably kept him from the Combine. But look, he had a great year at UTSA. Over 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns, 89 catches. He's got the long arms. He's able to attack the football in the air. Has decent speed to him as well. So it would have been nice to see him work out, but I think he's a guy that could be a late day 3 guy. More than likely, he's going to be a priority free agent. I think when you're looking at the receiver position, he was probably the guy that stood out as the biggest snub. Which takes us to the running backs. So the running backs, we've got 29, average 21 taken. We know that this position has been devalued. We don't have anybody, we don't have a Bijan Robinson that's going to be drafted in round number 1. But I think really you're going to see in that 2nd through 4th round range, a lot of running backs come off the board. And I think Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, we know he should be ready toward his ACL. We know that he should be ready by training camp. So interview at the Combine, obviously that's going to be big, but he's neck and neck for me as the number 1 running back, along with Trey Benson out of Florida State. When I look at Trey Benson, he's probably one of the more complete running backs. We're going to see him catch the football out of the backfield. We're going to see not only the speed, he should be running in the 4.4s. That's what everybody's been saying. But then he also has that contact balance and then that shiftiness. So he'll run by you, he'll run over you, he'll run around you. Trey Benson is going to be a guy, I think he and Jonathan Brooks, 2nd round picks, that makes a lot of sense. Blake Corum out of Michigan. This is the guy that battled back from the knee injury. He looks like he's all the way back. This is the guy with the jump cuts. Watch the feet, watch the footwork in the drills. Not overly fast. I don't think he has that 2nd gear, so I don't think that 40 time is going to be all that impressive. But watch the 10-yard split, and again, the shiftiness, and then you want to see him catch the football out of the backfield. That's really where a lot of these these running backs are going to do their damage, and so he's one of those guys to keep an eye out for there. Bucky Irving out of Oregon, the same thing. Look, Bucky Irving, when you look at the stats, this guy, frankly, he had more receptions than any other running back in the draft, 55. So when you think about that, this guy, the ability to make plays with the ball in his hands, the route running ability, he's going to be a guy that's going to be putting that on display. Another guy, Will Shipley. Look, he had 31 receptions this past season as well. Will Shipley is one of those guys that it's so difficult to bring him down because he does such a great job, not taking on that blow head on. Has this way of kind of slipping that contact so that he doesn't, can really move forward, kind of work through that contact and continue down the field. Obviously 2022 was his biggest year, over 1,100 yards and 15 touchdowns this past season. 827 yards on the ground. I know that he struggled a little bit at times. I think there were some injuries that he was dealing with as well. But when healthy, Will Shipley, I think he's flying under everybody's radar. But he's one of the better running backs in this draft class. Audric Estime, big physical back. You're going to see some nice athleticism out of him. He's also a really good pass blocker as well. The understanding and the ability to move from one side of the formation over to the other to pick up some of the blitzes. He's one of those guys, one of the better pass blockers in this draft at the running back position. He's a guy to me that's going to be in that running for that day 2 pick. Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. Look, this guy is only 19 years old. And, I remember the talk when he was a 17-year-old freshman and, at 6'2" and 238 pounds, Fell just 16 yards shy of 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. But look, over 3,400 yards, just under 3,500 yards on the ground, 35 touchdowns in his career. Didn't catch the football a whole lot in his first 2 years there with the Badgers. Actually caught more passes under Luke Fickell than he did in his 2 years previously. 28 catches, just 132 yards, very short passes. So I think that's really where his game is going to need to continue to develop. When I think about a guy like Melvin Gordon didn't catch a ton of footballs during his time there at Wisconsin either. But this is a one cut and go type of a guy, and once he gets that head of steam, he's going to run through you, and he's got some good speed as well. So at 6'2" and 238 pounds, I'm curious to see what that 40 time is going to be. I think if he starts turning some heads with some pretty fast 40 times, you're going to see him continue to move up draft boards. Marshawn Lloyd out of USC. Keep an eye on him again in the drills with the footwork. I think he's got some of the quicker feet in this draft. Jump cuts, much like Blake Corum. You like the contact balance, but he's another guy. Excellent receiver. You saw that at the Senior Bowl. Also, when he was at SC, he was a dynamic weapon out of the backfield for Caleb Williams. So he's a guy that I think is going to be in that early day 3 conversation. I think that's going to make sense where he fits in there. And then Ray Davis out of Kentucky. This is another guy. Look, he transferred in to Kentucky from Vanderbilt, and when he did that, all he did was put on a show. I think he kind of really put everyone on notice as a guy that everyone needs to be focused on, and that's one of the beauty. This is a guy. Look, he grew up homeless at one point, and he's one of those guys that's just hungry. And I think that's why he does a lot of the little things well. He's 5'10", 216 pounds, so he's very stout. Back-to-back years with over 1,000 yards, 14 touchdowns this past season, also 33 receptions. And look, the previous season he had 29 receptions, so he's the guy that's consistently making those catches out of the backfield. And I think what really put him on the map was that game against Florida. 33-14 win for Kentucky, and that was their 5th win in a row. And he goes out 26 carries, 280 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That long 75-yarder, obviously was one of the highlights for him. Really, the back half of the season, he struggled at times, and I think it was more so a product of that offense, and that offensive line struggled to kind of get things going. Only 59 yards against Georgia, 26 against Bama, but did put up 128 against Missouri. But he was still so effective as a pass catcher. So even when he wasn't able to get the job done as a runner, he still found work, still found ways to be productive. And that's one of the things that you like. Even when he can't get the job done running the football, maybe the offensive line is getting jammed up, he's still able to go out and make plays for you. So I think that's really where teams are going to be excited. But I think the guy that may end up stealing the show, especially in terms of the 40 time, is going to be Jalen Wright out of Tennessee. 5'11", 200 pounds. This is a guy that I think, if he runs in those 4.3s, that's about to be expected. And over 1,000 yards this past season, 7.4 yards per carry, and just 137 carries, 22 receptions as well. And he's one of those guys, you love the speed, you love the contact balance. He's going to be a guy that I think is going to end up hearing his name called on day 2 of the draft. And I think he's going to be one of the more explosive running backs to come out of this draft. Dylan Lobby out of New Hampshire is another really interesting dude. This is a tremendous pass catcher. He's a running back. He reminds you a lot of Danny Woodhead. Because he's a guy that's coming from an FCS program, 5'10", 207 pounds, just 715 yards on the ground, but had 68 catches for 699 yards, including a 12 reception performance for 295 yards and a couple of touchdowns against Central Michigan, the second game of the season. And then followed that up later on in the year, 13 catches for another 128 yards and a score. How many running backs can say that they have double-digit receptions in 3 games? So obviously the hands, you saw that at the Senior Bowl as well. He's a guy, you want to see how he times. You want to see, can he how quick is he laterally, the lateral agility as well. But he's a guy that I think will be a lot of fun to watch at the next level. Frank Gore out of Southern Miss. We know what Frank Gore Jr. is. This guy is an athlete. He's a playmaker. He runs a lot like his dad. What's scary is he looks a lot like his dad as well. But 5'8", 185 pounds. Back-to-back years, over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns this past season, 75 receptions in his career as well. So I think we're going to see him catch the football really well out of the backfield. Mid-day 3 pick. Isaiah Davis out of South Dakota State. I want to see how fast he runs. To me, when I watched some of the film, I didn't see the explosive burst that I was expecting to see. But again, tremendous athlete. I think he's going to be physical. So as a runner, so I really want to see what he shows up with there. Isaac Guerrero is another big running back out of Louisville. He started his career at Wisconsin, transferred to the Cardinals, and he's an interesting dude. He's 6 foot, 220 pounds. Really burst onto the scene. At Louisville, teaming up with Jawar Jordan. 810 yards on the ground, 11 touchdowns to go along with 22 receptions. He's a guy that could surprise. I think he's kind of a fringe player. Is he going to get drafted? Is he not? But he's a guy that could surprise. I think Jace McClellan, Kendall Milton, you want to see those two guys kind of separate themselves from the pack a little bit. I think Michael Wiley out of Arizona battled a lot of injuries for the Wildcats, but a tremendous receiver out of the backfield. Kimani Vidal out of Troy. We know that he's a tremendous run blocker. Or a pass blocker. We've seen that. He's also a really good receiver as well. But Kimani Vidal had one of the best years as a running back. 5'8", 215 pounds. Not the biggest guy, but very stout. 1,661 yards on the ground and 14 touchdowns. And when I talked about the reception prowess, 92 receptions in his career, had 11.2 yards per reception in 2023 for the Troy Trojans. So he's a guy that I think is in that mid to late day 3 conversation, but a guy that I think needs to let's see him have a decent day and could potentially move up draft boards. I think Jawar Jordan out of Louisville is going to run fast. Dylan Johnson out of Washington. Is he finally back and healthy from the foot injury? Curious to see just how fast he is. He's a physical running back. We know that really that's what you're going to get out of him. Just curious to see if there is any of that top end speed. Will we get to see any of that? And then maybe the best story of all the running backs is Cody Schrader. This was a guy. Look, he was at Division II Truman State. 4 years, just dominated the competition there. Truman State, by the way, is where my dad went to school. My dad actually is going to be celebrating his 87th birthday on March the 5th, right after the Combine. So looking forward to celebrating that with him. But back to Cody Schrader, who's my dad's favorite player in college, not named Caleb Williams. And I think when you watch Cody Schrader, he walked on there at Missouri, and a guy that just continues to work. And that's what you love about him. This is a guy that he's not the biggest, he's not the fastest, not the strongest, but man, this guy plays with a lot of heart. You see that, plays his butt off. He just gets better and better as the game progresses. So, he's number 8 in the Heisman voting. I mean, come on. This is a guy that just continues to get better and better as the season progresses. So that's something that I think I'm really looking forward to seeing. Just, how fast does he get a time? I think he's going to be a really solid receiver as well. But look, this is the only guy who can boast that he had 100-yard games against both Georgia and Ohio State, top 10 defenses, 112 yards on the ground against the Bulldogs, and 128 yards in the bowl win over Ohio State. And look, I think if you haven't seen Cody Schrader play, I think you're going to fall in love with the guy. I think he'll be a day 3 pick, probably a mid to late day 3 pick, but he's definitely played himself into a draft selection, that's for sure. If nothing else, just put on the game film of that Tennessee game. 205 yards on the ground, 116 yards through the air. That doesn't happen very often in the SEC. So, Cody Schrader's a dude that can make a lot of plays. So these are the guys that we're going to be seeing on Saturday, March 2nd. Now the running backs, at 29, invited, there were 3 snubs. Jabari Small out of Tennessee, probably a minor snub there. If Keelan Robinson out of Texas was getting an invite, I would have expected Jabari Small to get invited. Blake Watson, look, he started his career at Old Dominion, but then he transfers to Memphis, and he was second only to Bucky Irving in receptions. You love the speed, you love the suddenness, over 1,100 yards on the ground, and then the receptions. 53 receptions, as I said. So he's a guy that can get the job done on the ground and through the air. Not the biggest guy, but definitely a change of pace back, and a guy that I think will get drafted because of his receiving prowess. And then one other guy that I was surprised was Carson Steele out of UCLA. I think because he lost his job to J.J. Harden, I think there were some fumble issues as well, but he's one of those guys that, if nothing else, if he had stayed at Ball State, he probably would have gotten the invite. Over 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns at that level. That was at the MAC. Goes to UCLA, still 847 yards on the ground, and a guy that showed some decent hands. Also solid as a pass blocker. Physical, more of a one-cut, make you miss and then go. Not going to be overly shifty. Has the flowing locks. Looks like Thor. 6'1", 225. He would have been one of the guys putting up a ton of weight in the bench press. He's one of Bruce Feldman's freaks. Ended up on the freaks list because of the athleticism and the physicality. Kind of surprised that he wasn't invited. One other guy that I should mention is Tyrone Tracy out of Purdue. Now Tyrone Tracy, he's a running back, 5'11", 201, but he started his career as a receiver at Iowa. And when you look at it, over 1,200 yards total through the air. Iowa didn't throw a ton of passes, but look, 716 yards on the ground, 8 touchdowns to go along with another 19 receptions. Watch him run a very fast 40 time. That's going to be something that I think is going to jump out. And I think because of his versatility as a receiver and as a running back, you're going to see him get drafted on day 3. I don't have him currently in my mock draft. Don't know why, because he's a guy that I think, because of that versatility, like I said, he's going to find himself drafted. Let's get to the tight ends, shall we? So we'll talk about the tight ends, and I think Brock Bowers obviously is the guy that everyone's going to be talking about. How tall is he? Is he 6'4"? Is he 6'3"? Where's he at there? And then what's the weight going to be? I think he's one of those tight ends. He's a solid blocker. A lot of people give him a hard time about it, but he actually isn't that bad. He's not as bad as everybody makes him out to be. Yes, he is one of those guys that's going to be a weapon either on the outside or as a slot receiver. But I think he's going to run fast. I think he'll run closer, not quite to that Evan Ingram time, but I think he'll run a fast time. Is he a guy that's going to come off the board in the top 10 picks? I think it wouldn't surprise me if Harbaugh decided to go ahead and take his tight end because he loves tight ends. But I think he can wait and get another tight end later on in the draft. I think ultimately they do need to go O-line, but Brock Bowers, I think the Jets at 10, I think the Colts at 15. That's probably, the floor. That's probably where he's going to end up hitting. So that range, you're curious to see what the measurements are going to be. But I think he's a guy that's going to test very well and will come away obviously as that number 1 tight end. And top 10, that's really the big question mark. He's one of those guys. Look, when Kyle Pitts left the Combine, everybody said, yes, this is a guy that's going to be coming off the board in the top 10. Brock Bowers wants to make the same type of impression. I think after that, you got Ja'Tavion Sanders out of Texas. I think you see the physicality as a blocker. Showcase that athleticism as a receiver. He's got decent speed, but I don't think it's mind-blowing. It's not going to blow anybody away. But this is a guy that I think is still going to make a lot of plays down the field. Look, he was one of those weapons that was a reliable target for Quinn Ewers. 6'4", 256, 682 yards, 15.2 yards per reception. So he was a guy that he liked to hit down the seam. Cade Stover out of Ohio State. When you think of all the athletic tight ends, you don't really talk about Cade Stover too much, 6'4", 255. He started his career at Ohio State as a linebacker, moved to tight end, and over the the last 3 seasons, over 1,000 yards through the air and 10 touchdowns. I love the blocking. He's one of the better blocking tight ends in this year's draft. So you'll see his physicality there as a blocker. But then, I think this is a chance for him to showcase the athleticism as a receiver. We've already seen that out of Theo Johnson from Penn State. I think he's definitely helped himself with his performance at the Senior Bowl, separated himself from everybody else that's there. 6'6", 250. He also needed to remind everybody, that, hey, he's not a bad Penn State tight end himself, especially after the emergence of Tyler Warren, but a guy that I think because he showcased what he did there at the Senior Bowl, you look at the stats, they're not going to be overwhelming. Did have 7 touchdowns this past year, but I think the athleticism, that's something that you're going to be looking for from him for sure. Dallin Holker, I think, from an athletic standpoint, the athletic profile really jumps out, and he was a lot of fun to watch at Colorado State. 6'5", 225 pounds, started his career at BYU, then moved to the Rams, and 64 catches, 767 yards, 6 touchdowns. You watch the way he was able to contort the body, make some difficult catches down the field, able to give full extension on a couple of throws, and just every time he turned around, this guy was making a big play. And I think this is a way, kind of a coming out party, if you will, for Dallin Holker. He's not the best blocker, so that's one of the things that you'll see. Watch some of those drills when he's hitting the bags. His feet will probably stop relatively quickly, as opposed to some of the other guys. I think you'll see Cade Stover, Tavian Sanders, AJ Barner is going to be another guy that I think is going to mow right through those blocking drills. But Dallin Holker, let him cook on the outside as a receiver or in the slot. He'll be a lot of fun to watch there. As is Trey Knox out of South Carolina. He's another guy that I think is just continuing to get better and better at the tight end position. Started his career at Arkansas, was a receiver. South Carolina moves him to tight end. I think that's ultimately where he's destined to be at the next level. I think that athleticism is going to be on display. I just think he's not much of a blocker. Speaking of blockers, though, how about Ben Sinnott? Ben Sinnott, to me, I think is going to be a day 2 pick. I actually have him in my top 5 at the tight end position right now. 6'4", 245. Line him up wherever you want. Line him up at H-back. Line him up at fullback. Inline tight end. Put him out in the slot. He's even been split out wide by K-State. And 49 catches, 676 yards, and 6 touchdowns. This was a guy that it didn't matter where you lined him up. He was always making plays. You loved the contact balance. He was just running through guys, just yards after catch. And then as a blocker, again, physical, mean streak. But I think this will be a way for him to showcase some of that athleticism. Because look, I when I think about tight ends and I think about guys that are known as blocking tight ends, if you will, the name that always comes to mind is George Kittle. Why? Well, George Kittle was not a highly decorated player coming out of Iowa, right? 6'4", 250 pounds, was a 5th round pick, number 146 overall of the 49ers. This dude's now obviously an all-pro. But when you think about what he did there at the Combine, that's really where things started jumping out. People shouldn't be taking notice. 6'3", 300, 3/4 inches, 247 pounds. Runs a 4.5, 240 with a 1.51 10-yard split. So that in and of itself tells you you've got an athletic tight end, and just put on some of the film and just watch him as a blocker there at Iowa, and you knew what you were getting. So some of these other guys, that's going to be something that Ben Sinnott is going to be a guy that you're going to be watching out for. AJ Barner, 6'6", 245, physical player, started his career at Indiana, then transferred to Michigan. Physical, I think the blocking is really going to be his signature, but you want to see some of that athleticism out of him. Just how athletic is he going to be? Jared Wiley out of TCU is another guy. Look, he's 6'7", he's huge, 255. Started at Texas, transferred to the Horned Frogs, 520 yards through the air and 8 touchdowns this past season. I think he's going to be one of the better blockers as well, but a guy that showcases his ability to make catches down the field. Brevin Spann-Ford, 6'7", 270. Struggles at times, catching footballs, but another guy that I think could be physical as a blocker. Tip Ryman, same thing there at Illinois. Much better athlete than I think people were expecting. I think Devin Culp of Washington, Tanner McLaughlin out of Arizona, 2 tight ends coming out of the Pac-12. The physical profiles. Culp, much more twitchy than I think people would expect. Tanner McLaughlin, he's not going to wow you with the athleticism, but a guy that just gets the job done. Jack Westover, another guy there out of Washington, more undersized, but man, he was one of those weapons that was very, very reliable. Eric All is going to have to answer the injury questions. It seemed like he got knee injury at Michigan and then again at Iowa, so that's going to be a huge concern there. And then Jaheim Bell, what is he going to measure in at, and then what's he going to run? Because when I think of Jaheim Bell, I think of a buffed up receiver, 6'3", 230. But look, over 1,200 yards through the air, 9 touchdowns. But look, when you're talking about an undersized tight end like this, I think back to the 2021 draft and a guy like Brevin Jordan, right? So Brevin Jordan, in his career with the Hurricanes, 105 receptions, over 1,300 yards, 13 touchdowns. This guy was a weapon down the field, right? Then at the Combine, measures in at 6'2" and 5'8", 247 pounds. Then he goes out and runs a 4.67 40. That 40 time for a guy that's a little undersized. Brevin Jordan wound up getting drafted in the 5th round because of it. I think that's ultimately where Jaheim Bell ends up coming off the board as well. When I look at this tight end group at the Combine, you've got 16 tight ends there. There were exactly 16 tight ends drafted last year. I think you could see as many as 16 drafted again this year. If there's anybody that I was surprised to see not invited to the Combine, it's Mason Fairchild out of Kansas. If you listen to my podcast for any length of time, you know I'm a big fan of Mason Fairchild. He's not the athlete that's going to wow you by any means, but what you do get with him is just consistency as a weapon down the seam at 6'5", 250. He's also a pretty solid blocker. 82 catches, over 1,100 yards, and 10 touchdowns in his career. He's a guy that I think could end up sticking on an NFL roster. Just one of those underrated tight ends. So keep an eye out for Mason Fairchild as the draft comes along. So now we're at Sunday, and now we're looking at the offensive line and the special teams. First, want to start with the special teams group. Obviously, if you're looking for a punter, the guy to look for is Tory Taylor out of Iowa. This dude just launches, just booms it. I mean, this guy, look, he's the Ray Guy Award winner. He's 6'4", 231, Aussie. Look, I mean, 93 punts, 48.2 yard average. I mean, this guy, just the leg, he was a difference maker. He was probably the best offensive weapon that Iowa had because he was changing the field position. I mean, when you're looking at guys in the stands wearing, shirts talking about the punter, you know that Tory Taylor, cult hero, and he's a guy that I think you'll see get drafted early on in day number 3. I think Joshua Carty is another guy, the kicker out of Stanford. I think when you talk about Joshua Carty, you're going to talk about a model of consistency. 6'3", 205, so good size as well. Missed just 1 extra point in his career. 51 of 60 in terms of the field goals. Joshua Carty, I think, has one of the better legs. And then don't rule out the thicker kicker out of Missouri, Harrison Mevis. Now, Harrison Mevis, look, when you look at him, all right, 5'11", 240 pounds. You look at the numbers, and you're like, all right, only 80% field goals made this past year, 24 of 30, but from 50 plus, this guy is almost automatic. Really, he struggles mostly on kicks from 30 to 39 yards. He kicked that 61-yarder, a game winner there against K-State that really kind of propelled Missouri into the season that they've had. I think a guy like Harrison Mevis, I could see him with the Rams. I think Carty could also be a pick for the Rams. Rams need a kicker desperately. And then Will Reichert out of Alabama is the other guy. Look, this guy was a finalist for the Lou Groza Award, and there's a reason for it. Just another guy that was just automatic. When Saban pushed him out there, it seemed like he was knocking down kicks left and right. 22 of 25 from with field goals. So another guy, I think we could see as many as three kickers. And then in terms of the punters, he wasn't invited, but Austin McNamara out of Texas Tech is another punter to be watchful for. I think he has a good chance of getting drafted as well late on day number 3. So wanted to give some love to the specialists, which takes us finally to the offensive line. And look, there are 70 offensive linemen here. I mean, you're talking about a little bit of everything at this offensive line group. When you think about it, we've averaged 47 offensive linemen over the last 3 years, including 43 this past season. So how many are we going to see drafted this year? I think you're probably right in that same range, 47 to 50, probably right around there. Obviously, the first thing that everyone's going to be looking for is Joe Alt. You're going to watch the technician. You're going to watch the typewriter feet. You're going to watch his sets. You're going to watch the angles that he takes. Just going to be a smooth athlete, smooth operator, converted tight end. Olu Fashanu. Dude, you want to talk about athleticism. This guy is probably the most athletic tackle and really offensive line prospect in this year's draft. But what's going to be fun is right after him is going to be Troy Patanu out of Washington. This is a guy at 6'4" and about 320 pounds. Everyone had, is dead set on moving him to guard. And right now I have him penciled in as the number 1 guard. But the more I watch the film, the more I watch, the angles that he takes, whether it's the jump sets or the 45s, it doesn't really matter what technique he uses, what angle he uses. This is a guy that always seems to be in control. You see zero wasted movement. You watch him getting out in space, and he's looking to punish people. But such a tremendous athlete for his size. And yeah, you want to see the arm length, but I still think this is a guy that, should he project that inside a guard? Sure, but I think he could play tackle if the team really wanted to put him there. Just a tremendous athlete, a guy that I wouldn't be surprised to see come off the board in the top half of round number 1. I think the other tackle that we have to mention in that upper echelon is Taliesin Fuaga out of Oregon State. Big, massive dude. I think another guy that you're going to see tremendous athleticism from. You're also going to see tremendous power in his hands. I think that's going to be very evident early on in the drills. I think a guy that's going to rival Taliesin Fuaga in terms of some of that strength is J.C. Latham out of Alabama. I think this guy has the length for the position. I think right tackle is in his wheelhouse. He's definitely going to be a starting right tackle at the next level. I think Cincy could use a right tackle. Are they on the market for one this year? This would be a great pickup for them. I think Latham, if the Jets, you could go as high as the Jets at number 10. If they decide that they want to look for a right tackle as well. But the strength, the physicality, but the power in his hands, that's one of the things that I think I just can't get over. The bigger thing with him, I think, in terms of the question marks, is some of that lateral agility. There were some speed rushers that were getting around him with ease, so that's something that he needs to work on his sets just a little bit. Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma, another guy who was converted, I want to say HVAC at TCU. Tremendous athlete. You watched him at the Senior Bowl, and he was dominating guys with that lateral quickness, that lateral agility. I think that's going to be on display at the Combine. I mean, all first-rounders here. I think when you're talking about interior linemen, I think the conversation needs to start with Jackson Powers-Johnson of Oregon, maybe the best center prospect that we've seen in quite some time. A guy that I think isn't going to get past number 20 there with the Steelers. Steelers have let Mason Cole go, and I think people have talked about, well, they could take linebacker, they could go defensive back. Man, if you have a chance to get the best center in the draft, this was a team that drafted Marquise Pouncey, and you had a center sitting there on your roster, guaranteed production for years. You had a Pro Bowl caliber center. If you've got that same type of a guy, I think Mike Tomlin would jump for the chance to nail that. And Jackson Powers-Johnson, from his personality to the physicality on the field, I mean, you watched him just stone guys, you watched him bury guys. at the Senior Bowl, and he did that all season long. You watched him climb to the next level, so you saw the athleticism as well. He's about as clean a center prospect as we've seen. He'll be a first rounder for sure. Watch him in the drills. Watch him when he gets out in space. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, that's for sure. I think Graham Barton's another one, though. Graham Barton out of Duke. This guy has 5-position versatility. He's played a lot of positions, including center. Is he a guard? Is he a center? Is he a tackle? He's got shorter arms, so I'm really curious to see what he measures in at lengthwise. But this is a guy you put on the film against Jared Verse, and you watch his ability to learn from his mistakes and reset. And there were some reps where he absolutely dominated Verse, who's a guy that's going to get drafted in the top half of round 1. I think Barton. I think the lowest he probably goes is maybe Tampa. They can look for some interior line help. I look at a team like Miami sitting there at 21. You could potentially have Jackson Powers Johnson and Graham Barton come off the board back-to-back picks. So I think you just want to see that athleticism continue to be on display there. I think that's obviously what teams are going to be looking for sure. Especially with him. Amarius Mims out of Georgia. I think you're going to see a guy that teams are going to get excited about. He's tall at 6'7", moves really well. The question is, he just hasn't played a lot of games, so this truly is a projection. He's battled some injuries, just can't stay on the field. So do you really want to take him in round number 1? I think the medicals are going to have to check out for him a little bit. And I don't know. He's one of those boom or bust prospects right now, but I think a big combine performance really solidifies his status as a round 1 offensive tackle. I think when you look at guards, Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State is going to be a lot of fun. This guy has enough athleticism to kick outside and play tackle. He's done that quite a bit at K-State, but he's going to be a guy, I think he'd be a Pro Bowl caliber guard. When you watch the nastiness, the physicality, watch him when he pulls, watch him when he hits the bags. It's going to be a lot of fun. I wish Zach Zinter had injured his leg, because watching BB and Zinter blow up some bags would be a hell of a lot of fun. Christian Haynes out of Connecticut, I think you're going to see some nice athleticism out of him. Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. Is he a tackle? Is he a guard? I think he's just a damn good football player and a guy that, fringe first rounder, probably going to be a second round pick, but really another guy that's a lot of fun. Patrick Paul out of Houston has tremendous length. I think he has a future as a starting left tackle in the league. Is it enough to get him drafted in round 1? Probably not. He'll be a day 2 guy. Keep an eye on Javon Foster out of Mizzou. He looks the part, right? And he's strong. He's physical at the point of attack. He's got tremendous length, tremendous base. The balance is there. But the question really is going to come down to footwork and then the lateral agility. Watch how he times. That's going to be a big question mark. Dominic Pooney out of Kansas. With this guy, he played tackle, didn't give up a sack. I think only 8 pressures, didn't even give up a hit. And I think he's going to move inside to guard, but I think this is going to be another guy that you're going to see just tremendous athleticism, and is going to be teams are going to be turning heads for sure. Kingsley Suamataia out of BYU. Look, with Suamataia, he's an athlete. He's a dancing bear. He's a guy that moves so well. I don't see enough consistency from him. I think he'll still be a day 2 pick, because I think the athleticism and the potential is absolutely there. I think he's a little bit more raw than I think people are really wanting to come out and say. Zach Frazier, West Virginia, former wrestler. I think you're going to see that on display there at the Combine as well. Easy day 2 pick for me. Cedric Van Pran out of Georgia. I think he's going to have some of those shorter arms, but he really, look, these guys with shorter arms that are top prospects at their position, they've played their entire career with these shorter arms, and they've been able to develop ways of being able to take that, use that to their advantage. I think that's one of the things that Cedric Van Pran does really well, is he wants to get his hands on you, get into your body, and then just continue to drive you, out of the play. And he's going to be a guy that I think we need to be watching out for Roger Rosengarten out of Washington. This is the guy that at Washington had some really good tape. I think there's going to be some recency bias. There were some reps at the Senior Bowl for sure, but I'm really talking about Michigan in that national championship. The hold that people are talking about, was it really a hold? Was it not? But he struggled at times against both Jalen Harrell and Braden McGregor, and so I think this is going to be a time for him to really show off his stuff. Day 3 guys to really be looking out for. Hunter Norzad out of Penn State's a much better center prospect than people give him credit for. You think about Juice Scruggs. People weren't really talking about him a whole lot. Where does Houston take him? In round 2. And this guy is a starter for them and one of their better players on that offensive line. Hunter Norzad is a guy that you watch him play, and he's an absolute stud. He's going to be a starter at the next level for sure. I like Charles Turner III out of LSU, but watch it. You watch him in the one-on-ones and such, and he flashes his hands so quickly. That's something that I think stands out. Christian Mahogany out of Boston College. Is he a 3rd rounder? Probably going to be a 4th rounder. Medicals need to check out for him. Had the knee injury in 2022. 2023 bounces back. You see the physicality with him. I think you just want to make sure that he's bouncing back from an injury standpoint. Christian Jones out of Texas, big right tackle. He didn't play on the left side. That was Kelvin Banks. But I think Christian Jones, you saw the power. You saw better athleticism from him. So I think he's a guy that if he could showcase some of that athleticism again, I think he's a guy that can rise up draft boards. Sata'oa Laumea, look, he was a right tackle there at Utah. He's going to kick inside the guard, and I think he's going to be a starter at the next level. I think you're going to see a lot of power and physicality. My question is just how quick is he? The lateral agility. I want to see him in the drills, the way that he works out. Bo Limmer out of Arkansas. He can play guard. He can play tackle. You saw some nastiness to him. You saw this guy was just tough as nails, and I think that's what a lot of teams are going to like that. Same with Mason McCormick out of South Dakota State, the guard. You saw him at the East West Shrine Bowl, and dude, this guy was just stoning guys left and right. The leverage, you can argue who has better leverage between him and the wrestler, Zach Frazier. But I think you'll be seeing that on display during a lot of the workouts. Drake Nugent out of Michigan, really a shorter center. That's going to be the question mark. How tall is he? Is he 6'1", truly? That's something that I think to watch out for. Is he a guy that you're going to want to draft? I think Ladarius Henderson out of Michigan really struggled at the Senior Bowl. Couldn't really anchor, because look, he's going to have to kick inside the guard, and I don't think he necessarily has the foot speed on the outside to handle the speed. So a big question mark there. Can he anchor? Delmar Glaze out of Maryland. Is he a tackle? Is he a guard? Matt Goncalves out of Pittsburgh. I think he'd probably be a nice swing tackle at the next level. Garrett Greenfield out of South Dakota State, the best FCS tackle by far. He's a guy that I think will be a day 3 pick. I think he's a guy that just cement your status with this group. Trente Jones didn't play a ton there at Michigan, but you're going to see that athleticism, I think, on display. Another guy that's going to really turn heads is going to be Gottlieb Adeze out of Maryland. And this is a guy that I think is going to fly under radars. I think he's going to put on a show from an athletic standpoint. I think he's more of a developmental guy right now. Brandon Coleman out of TCU. Look, he played both tackle and guard, quite a bit of it there at TCU. So I think this will be a question to really put to bed. Is he a tackle? Is he a guard? Can he play both positions? Blake Fisher. There are a lot of better, or more, I shouldn't say better, but more hyped right tackles. I think this is going to be a chance for him to really kind of put his name back out there as a guy that should be drafted there in that day 3 range. Tanner Bortolini out of Wisconsin. Tough, physical, anchors really well. Curious to see just how athletic he is. Should he be drafted higher or lower than Hunter Norzad? Keep an eye on the two of them. I think that's something to be mindful of. Karan Amagadije out of Yale. Athletic, but a project. So the question is just how high are you going to draft an athletic project? Isaiah Adams out of Illinois played tackle for the Illini. I think he's best suited inside a guard. So he's a guy that I think will fly under some radar. He'll be a guy to watch there at the Combine. I think Keaton Bills out of Utah has a chance to end up starting at the next level. Nobody's really talking about him, but I love his physicality. That's something that you definitely saw. Both he and Maye, they really embody that toughness that Kyle Whittingham really exudes there with the Utes. So he'll be another guy I think to kind of keep an eye out for. Dylan McMahon out of NC State, interior line, can line up all over those positions. I think that's what makes him a little bit more valuable and a guy that teams are going to be looking to potentially lock down and draft and can use him across a variety of positions late in the draft. And then Javion Cohen, just how athletic is he? That's going to be a question mark there. Just how high could Cohen go? I think he can go as high as the third round, as low as the sixth round. Probably in that fourth to fifth round range is really what feels comfortable there. So those are some of the guys. I think Ethan Driscoll out of Marshall is another guy that is going to be interesting. He's 6'9", so you want to see that pad level. Can he keep it down? That's a huge question mark right now. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. You think about Aneem Dankwa out of Howard, another big, huge, mountain of a man. 6'8", 362. How well does he carry that weight? What does he look like in the drills? You're going to be able to compare him against a lot of these other athletes, and so that's going to be something that I think teams are definitely going to be looking at for sure. And then Josiah Iserin out of Eastern Kentucky, 6'6", 320. Another guy, likely a right tackle, possibly kick inside the guard. This is going to be another chance, another opportunity to put his name out there as a potential, late day 3 pick or potential priority free agent. But teams are always going to be looking for offensive linemen, and so I think you've got a good crop here. A lot of guys to cycle through, and like I said, you've got a lot of versatility. Guys that are left tackles, guys that are right tackles, guys that play both of those positions, guys that have position at both tackle and guard, 5-position versatility, guys that can play all positions along the interior of the line. You got big physical guys, you got the athletes, the more finesse players. So a little bit of everything. A lot of converted tight ends this year too. That's another thing that I thought was super interesting with this draft class. So like I said, I've got probably maybe anywhere between 47 to 50 offensive linemen drafted. And when you think about that, 2022 there were 49, 2021 there were 48. So right in that range, we're right in that wheelhouse. Now, the only tackle that I would say that was probably snubbed was Travis Glover, a guy that was kind of a late entry there to the Senior Bowl out of Georgia State. He's a guy that I think will still get a look at the next level. I don't know that he'll get drafted, but 6'6", 323 pounds, a guy that can be a tackle or a guard. Teams love that versatility, even as a priority free agent. I think he'll be a guy that'll, if nothing else, spend time on a practice squad. So those are the offensive players to keep an eye out for, and the specialists, can't forget them. But those are the guys to keep an eye out for, mainly on Saturday, March the 2nd, and Sunday, March 3rd, with the tight ends as the one exception, because they'll be working out on the same day as the defensive backs. That's tomorrow, Friday, March the 1st. So that does it for our Combine preview. Now, after the Combine, come back and we'll do a Combine recap. We'll talk about both the offensive and defensive standouts. Like I've mentioned previously, I have a good feeling that we'll spend some time talking about Dallas Turner, about Peyton Wilson. Those two guys, definite standouts. Look, Peyton Wilson, Edgerrin Cooper, 1 and 2 in terms of the off-ball linebackers. Jeremiah Trotter not too far behind. edge rushers, I think you see guys, again, solidifying their status there at the top with Dallas Turner, Laiatu Latu, Jared Verse, Chop Robinson, and then a D tackle, Byron Murphy as well. So a lot there to unpack, a lot to talk about, and I'm sure over the next 3 days there will be a lot of other standouts and guys that, frankly, come out of nowhere, and you have to go back and say, you know what, I did not expect that from him. I gotta go back and look at the tape, both good and bad. I think there are some surprises, from a negative standpoint as well, and you have to kind of scratch your head and go, wait, what did I just see there? Why is that time so slow? And you have to go back and look at some of the film. So there'll be a lot to cover, and obviously we're getting into the swing of things with free agency coming up and mock drafts. We'll be able to go ahead and break a lot of those things down. As the team needs really start playing out, then you'll really be able to have those mock drafts take shape even more. So enjoy your weekend, everyone. For ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Combine is here. It's a lot of fun to watch each and every year. Tune in to the NFL Network all weekend long. Enjoy the offense and defense. It's going to be a blast. And until next time, everyone, I am out of here.